Good.
It just turned 6:30, so yeah. Okay, well, we are live here on Bother the Father. So we have a few people here tonight. So again, this is an open forum. If anyone has any questions, they're free to ask. I'll try to answer to the best of my ability, and if I don't know, I will try to find out. So some news: we just had our first OCIA Adult Faith Formation this last weekend. We had a better turnout on Monday than on Sunday, which is great. But yeah, we have a few people. Looks like they're going to prepare to come into the church fully. So good news. One thing I didn't mention, which I probably should, I didn't tell them yesterday, but if I don't know the answer, and I say this all the time here, I will find out, and I'll let you know if I don't. So as a matter of fact, we had a question today in the classroom about one of the saints. So today is St. Peter Claver, and I was trying to quiz the kids on what saint we're celebrating today, and one of the kids said St. Elizabeth, and I was like, yeah, I don't know when her feast day is. I got to go look that up. Because I know she has one, but she may have been taken off the canon for some reason. I don't know why. But we have a church just down the street at St. Elizabeth Mother John the Baptist, so I'm sure they celebrate a feast day. So I can have to find that out. So yeah, I'm always going to tell people that if I don't know, I will find out and try to get the answer to the best of my ability. So it may not be tonight, but it will be by next week, hopefully. So the floor is open. Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask?
So I got two quick questions. Watched the Mass where our two latest saints were canonized. Is it Saint Acutis or Saint Carlo Acutis, or so? What are they saying?
Sure.
You say their whole names all the time?
Well, yeah. So that's a good point. So the question was asked. We just the church just canonized, and this is the first time Pope Leo has canonized anybody. So we just canonized two saints this last weekend: Pier Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis. So the question is asked: how do we address them? Do we just call them Saint Carlo or Saint Frassati or Saint Pier Giorgio?
Yes.
I don't necessarily think it's the wrong way. I think what we've seen through history is we tend to forget that surnames are rather a modern invention. And when I say modern, I mean like 500, 600 years, right? So in other words, before, the 1500s, the 1400s, your name would be like, your first name and where you're from, right? So Mark of St. Louis, right? I mean, it'll be St. Mark of St. And that's not to say you still can't do that. So you could say like St. Carlo of England or something, right? There's probably not too many Carlos that are saints that are from England. So it's pretty good. So you bet you kind of know what you're talking about. So the question is, do we use their full name? Yeah, right. So they were canonized as they were baptized, right? So the only difference with that would be for a pope or maybe a religious who takes on a name.
They takes on a different name, yeah.
But for the most part, your baptismal name is your main identity. And so Saint Carlo Acutis would be the proper way to do to address him. Saint Pier Giorgio Frassati would be the proper way to address him. But if you were to say Saint Frassati or Saint Acutis, everyone kind of knows what you're talking about. I mean, so you get in the same discussion when we talk about like people like John Paul II. So there's a great movement, so to speak, to call Pope Saint John Paul II, Saint John Paul II the Great. I mean, that's not like he wasn't like known by that moniker when he was like alive. It was just something that kind of happens after death. And oftentimes these monikers are added after their death too. So in the same vein, if someone were to call Saint Carlo Acutis Saint Carlo the Great, okay, whatever, as long as you know what you're talking about. And part of that's just to make the distinction between like, different. I mean, look at like the name Therese. There's a lot of Saint Therese or Teresas, right? Well, how do we make that distinction between the two, between like Saint Teresa of Avila or Saint Therese Lisieux, right? Usually. Yeah, and that's usually how you would do that. I mean, even Therese Lisieux is actually a familial name, right? That's actually like more of a surname, even though it is the name of a town. But yeah, we these surnames are rather more of a modern invention. So we're going to see more and more saints really kind of be, first name, surname, rather than saint someone of somebody, of somewhere. Yeah. So yeah, that's going to be rather interesting over time. especially we get more in this century. Carlo is the first saint of this millennium. So it's kind of a new ball game, so to speak.
They had family. Both saints had family members present.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Sadi, maybe not immediate family.
No, he had I think it was a niece or something.
That's probably right. Because I mean, Saint Pier Giorgio Frassati, he died over 100 years ago. He actually died in 1925. So 100 years ago, after his death, he's now being canonized. Actually, for a saint, that's pretty quick. Absolutely. That's really not that not that slow. So it's very possible there would be people that at least knew his contemporaries that were still living. I don't know if he had any. I'm sure he didn't have any direct descendants. I'm sure the niece also was probably like what, 80.
She's very old.
Yeah.
I think they said that was the only third time that's ever happened. Back in the 1950s, it may have happened.
Well, there was a saint. I think it was still Pius XII, but Saint Maria Goretti. So Saint Maria Goretti, her story is rather tragic. She was 12. And she was attacked by a man who wanted to rape her.
Right.
And she, rather than giving up her virtue, she chose death. And the man that attacked her was actually at her canonization, converted, and became a lifelong devout Catholic. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. He actually, I think he spoke at the canonization mass too. So, yeah, I mean, it's not that it's out of the realm of possibility. When you get to certain saints, like let's say Pope St. John Paul II, he was canonized relatively quickly, very quickly, actually. Teresa of Calcutta, very quickly. She died in 1997, was canonized in 2016. That's less than 20 years. Even Carlo, I mean, he died in 2006.
So do you have an opinion on that? I mean, because
so here's the thing, right?
Well over 100 years. I mean, right? I mean,
I think that's always been kind of the case with a lot of the canonized saints when it comes to how quickly they are, because a lot of them depends on who the Pope is.
Or the miracles themselves.
Well,
I mean, you can't have
yeah.
Saint without the miracle.
Most of the modern contemporary saints we've had canonized within the last 100 years or so, there is a process. Now, I think we always want to be clear that the Holy Father can truncate that process or totally ignore the process at his discretion. That was a big controversy with John Paul II in his canonization of St. Faustina Kowalska. Because at the time of St. Faustina, when she was living, there was a lot of question about
whether she was
was she crazy? Or also, there was also like this kind of idea about the cult of the Divine Mercy that really may be more demonic than it really was divine. So John Paul II kind of cut all through that and said, nope, I was around in Poland when this was going on. I'm very much aware of what was happening, of the intention. And so, no, right? I think you find that with a lot of the saints that are canonized particular popes, even like Maximilian Kolbe. Now, he's a little more cut and dry. I mean, he was a Franciscan. He kind of was a little more Jerome-esque in his personality. So for those who don't know, St. Jerome, he was alive in the 4th century, well, way before any of these people. And his claim to fame was that he would translated the Bible from Greek into what they call the Vulgate, or like the common speech of Latin. And from that translation comes all the other translations we have today, right? So he was actually known to be rather grumpy, rather abrupt with people, right? He was not a people person, right? Still a saint, right? Still lived a holy, devout life, even though he may have offended people and maybe drove them away. Who knows? Apparently, Maximilian was very similar. That he had a particular mindset, and if you were not in that mindset, well, I don't have time for you. Of course, with Maximilian, he was sent to Auschwitz, and he was a martyr. He actually gave up his life for a man that was going to be put into harsh labor, which basically meant death.
Yeah.
And so because this man had 10 children and a family, Maximilian stepped in and actually lived for 2 weeks just off the Eucharist. And was known to kind of minister to the people that were in the camp with him. And so obviously even different personalities make up the community of saints, and it's not about their personalities, it's about the sanctity. So there's no doubt that people like, St. Faustina Kowalska, Maximilian Kolbe, Carlo Acutis, even Pier Giorgio Frassati, there was a lot of controversy with him because he was kind of being accused of having his actually cause was put on hold by Pius XII. Because it was thought that he was a little more very, very, very liberal. And by liberal, we have to understand what that means. It doesn't mean like laissez-faire, meaning, trying to find being open to things, right? In our modern day understanding of liberalism, we say like, we really come openness is progressive. And those aren't necessarily bad. As John tells us in his letters, progressive for progressive sake is not good, but it needs to be tempered by prudence and virtue. But in liberalism that we're talking about at the time of Pius XII and even before that, it's actually a openness to what we call a pluralism, meaning a rejection of the Catholic faith and looking at it as just a faith among multiple other faiths that have truth, right? And so it's hard because the church has said, there are truths in other faiths, but it would still be adamant in saying the Catholic faith has the fullness of it, right? So even though there's truths in other denominations and even natural religions, the Catholic faith, because it was given to us directly by Christ, not only includes all those truths, but even expands upon them to a fullness. And Pier Giorgio is actually kind of accused of maintaining that, whether you're Catholic or it doesn't really matter. They're all equally good. Yeah, right. So liberalism in that sense would have been not necessarily something that was appreciated. Now, it was a falsity. It wasn't true. And actually, it was said apparently that Pier Giorgio's sister actually traveled to Rome and talked to the Holy Father to answer questions and set everything straight. But that happens sometimes. Even with St. Faustina, her cause was put on hold because of these things. Mm-hmm. So the Pope really has a great deal of influence in it. But yeah, ultimately what the process is looking at is the sanctity of the person. And when we look at the process of canonization, one would say once they reach the state of venerable, you would say they've had enough virtue to actually be in heaven. The canonization process is really just more of a liturgical process on earth that we would say we want to celebrate these people or commemorate them on particular days. So that's why there's sort of a validation, so to speak, of these miracles. But again, the Holy Father can be like, nah, that's not necessary. We're good. What tends to happen though is there usually are after the canonizations, there would be miracles associated.
Sure.
But that also gets kind of tricky too, because one has to have a devotion to that particular saint completely. So if I were diagnosed with cancer, let's say, God forbid, but let's say I were diagnosed with it and I start maybe interceding, asking for intercessions from a multitude of saints, and then I get cured. Now, one of those might be, who knows? Let's say Father McGivney, right? The founder of the Knights of Columbus, right? He's up for canonization too. But he was one among like 50 that I was actually asking intercession for. Well, you can't attribute that particular miracle just to Father McGivney then. Right. Because, in that case, we wouldn't really know who to actually attribute that miracle to.
It has and I do know a little bit about the process, about how they ask all the doctors. They're trying to prove that it never happened, right? Mm. They want to know that it was just that saint and it was immediate.
Right. Well, not even the doctors, but they'll even go to the actual particular individual. Or there might be a circumstance where, let's say, there are certain circumstances where, let's say, a prayer card or some kind of relic was given to the person. Let's say they're unconscious and all of a sudden they awake. Mm-hmm. Hey, that's pretty evident. Right, because it wasn't like Saint Andrew said it was that particular card. So there has to be kind of the clear distinction that this was actually the attributed to this intercession of the saint. And that can be hard to show sometimes because there might be multiple miracles that happen that actually are validated through science and saying there's no explanation, but the person that the miracle happened to or the people surrounding them, they were praying to multiple saints.
Yeah.
And so, so we got to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, which is why these often take a long time.
Yeah.
Right, because it's more of a validation at that point than it is a confirmation, right? So at that point, we would say that person would be in heaven.
Right.
It's just more, okay, well, do we actually, have a day of commemoration for them or not?
Neat.
Yeah.
Okay. Neat. Neat.
So speaking of which, how do they determine what their feast day is going to be?
Yeah, that's good.
Death, canonization?
Yes. so in other words, the question was asked, how do they determine what day that their feast day would be on? Yeah, that actually varies. I mean, for instance, John the 23rd, right? So his feast day is actually October 11th. John the 23rd wasn't born October 11th. He didn't die on October 11th. There was not really a huge significant, like it wasn't like his confirmation or baptismal date.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, that was the day he was ordained or made the Pope. That was the actual opening of Vatican II, October 11th, back in 1963.
Okay.
So he was the Pope that opened Vatican II. So, okay, that has significance.
Yeah.
Would he have chosen that date? No.
Probably not.
Right? Who knows, right? But also, too, does he care?
Right. Yeah.
So it's really more kind of looking at those aspects. Most days are actually kind of taken by their death date. So like we just celebrated recently Teresa of Calcutta. Now her date, now that's what they're fascinating. Now I could be wrong on this, but I recall when she died in 1997, I always thought the day she died was September 4th. But in our ordos and in the things are celebrated, they celebrate on September 5th. Now that could be because in Rome, they're a few hours ahead of us. Right, so when she died, it might have been October 5th in Rome.
Yes.
Where here it could have been, September 5th in Rome, where here it could be September 4th.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of maybe the dividing factor, right? Okay. So yeah, but usually they tend to look at their death date, or is there some other significant date in their life that was kind of profound?
Yeah.
Like Saint Bernadette Soubirous. Well, her feast day is actually February 11th, but she shares that with Our Lady because that was the date that Our Lady first appeared to her in Lourdes, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of sad she doesn't have her own date, but hey, I think sharing with the Blessed Mother is quite an honor.
That's
right?
pretty good. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I give it to her.
Good come.
Exactly.
Right.
A lot of times also like there'll be like you'll have and companions, right? So like we just celebrated recently St. Charles Lwanga and companions. Now St. Charles Lwanga was a Ugandan minister. He was asked by the king to engage in illicit and immoral actions sexually, which he denied because he was a Christian, and because of that he was martyred, along with his companions who also denied doing it. Some were Anglican, but they're still venerated as martyrs, and even on the Catholic calendar would be named in that liturgy. So, it's often a joke that like, usually it's the person of the most prominence or most importance actually would be the first name. So if we were all driving in a car together and let's say we were run off the road by a terrorist, they would name the feast Saint Mark Madden and companions. So it's always that we were seminarians. It was all like whoever the driver was, that'd be the name. So that's how it kind of worked. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting how they kind of look at those things and how they name them. And so there isn't necessarily rhyme and reason. I think typically they look at more the death date, but they also kind of determine what was rather significant about this. Yeah. So like Carlo, his actually feast day is on the 12th of October. And I think that was the day he died, back in 2006. So, yeah. The other thing is, we know what Carlo was actually, I mean, not only sanctity, he actually kind of converted a lot of people around him, but he actually even has a legacy that lives on today. John should know this.
His page.
Yeah, his webpage.
Yeah, his webpage.
So, not only was he a big video game player, loved soccer, loved hiking, before he passed, started and was maintaining a webpage that documented all the Eucharistic and Marian miracles in the world.
Oh, wow.
And still be maintained today. I don't know who's maintaining it. Must be maybe it's a family member. I'm not sure. But he actually visited the place and documented these things.
Wow.
And so, it's pretty exhaustive. You can check it. It's kind of a brief history of what happened and for each of the places. So far, none in the United States. Although there was, I think, one that's recently kind of.
Wasn't there one in Green Bay?
Yeah, I can't remember. I know there's one in Connecticut, but I think it was a multiplication. That just happened a few years ago, and I think it was 2023. I think you're right. I think there was one up in Wisconsin of a host that was bleeding.
Yeah.
And that would have been probably the first documented one in the United States. There was also one recently down in Australia.
Yeah.
What's rather fascinating about these, they kind of happen about once a decade.
Hmm.
So the last one I think was in 2013. So 2023. That's about right on the rhythm. Yeah. Good.
Do you notice how some people were going up for the host? They would offer their hand and then draw it back and take it in the mouth and not touch it. There was the drone that was watching this.
Oh, at the mass.
Yeah, at the mass. I'm sorry.
No. So at the canonization mass for these two. So that's actually a Roman. So we have to understand too. At these masses, these are people from all around the world, right? So when we talk about reception of the Eucharist, and that's the question. If at this canonization mass, there seemed to be some confusion or deking, so to speak, of putting the hats out and then taking on the tongue. The reason that is because in papal masses, you always receive on the tongue.
Oh.
So coming from other places, like here in the United States, we have the allowance to receive either on the tongue or on the hand. Who decides that?
Oh, the priest, right? Or I think the person, right? The person goes up and he's. Well,
what I'm saying is, who's the one determining these allowances?
Oh,
the bishop.
Yeah.
Right. In this case, the OSCCB as a body, it said here in the United States, we're going to allow this, and all the bishops agree. Great. In other places, though, it's not allowance for that. And some would even say you should kneel and receive on the tongue.
Right.
So in Rome, there isn't the allowance to actually receive in the hand.
So the people that were offering their hand didn't know better.
Right. I would imagine that was the case.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Now I was there.
Yeah.
I received it in the hand.
Well, where were you?
At St. Peter's, behind the big Brancusi altar thing.
Okay.
Right there.
Under what pontificate?
Benedict.
That was 2 popes ago.
Okay.
Right. I mean, so it really depends on that, right? So the like I said, the local bishop has an authority.
So it was okay then.
I imagine.
Of
I mean,
course.
here's the thing. You don't really have any say in that, right? I mean, that really is determined by so even if it were a directive of the bishop, of the pope, that the clergy in Rome should only give communion out in the tongue. If a priest is putting your hand, you have no control over that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there could be some saying culturally, people don't know any better, so fine. Again, that would depend on the particular bishop, in this case, the particular pontificate, right? I think France has actually made that part of the Roman aspect was actually received on the tongue, which is kind of funny because he gets kind of a lot of flack sometimes of being a little bit too lax when it comes to liturgical norms, but that's always been tradition in Rome. So, I don't know.
Now I know.
Yeah. But I imagine that was going on. It was just people are used to certain ways and then.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's cool.
Yeah. I can't say for sure, but that would be my charitable interpretation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Because right, I think even here in St. Louis, when the Pope came, actually, when the Pope came here to St. Louis in 1999, I think we all received in the tongue, if I recall correctly. I don't remember receiving the hand on that. I mean, I thought that was also kind of interesting because I was used to receiving on the hand. But maybe that's just that particular minister. The other thing, too, is there is kind of an understanding that it actually helps with efficiency. It's
Yeah.
actually quicker to put on the tongue than it is in the hand. And,
Really?
well, it guards against like dropping, first off, and secondly, you get into a better rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into a rhythm, it is a lot quicker.
I would think on the tongue would be more apt to drop than.
Well, it is if you don't do it right. So yeah, I mean,
Which
you
is why they always had to have the patent.
right. So there's I think there's arguments both ways, but here in the United States, we're allowed to do both. So
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Right on.
Good. Yeah, questions, comments, concerns, heresies. No?
How are our teams doing? Just real quick recap. Do you know? I haven't heard.
I don't know. This
Okay.
weekend I didn't see. I was just more driving through and walking by and really
Thought we
sticking in
won
there.
this weekend, but I could be wrong.
Well, we had multiple teams. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, some like the younger kids don't really keep score. Other older kids, you know.
Yeah.
I know that the fireworks, which there's a question about that. On I guess it was Saturday night.
We have fireworks.
Well, apparently, I mean, no, we didn't have any fireworks.
No, I didn't.
Never mind.
Can't have fireworks or at least.
So yeah, no, but it's funny because they're all, but yeah, all these games going on are actually non-St. Anne teams. They do like the non-St. Anne teams of the week, and then St. Anne teams play on the weekend. But yeah, I guess I didn't hear anything. I know there was probably one game that was rather taut because there was a player that got a red card. And so whether that was deserved or not, there's a big question there. I don't know. But otherwise, I think it was rather tame. Yeah. So.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll see everyone next week for Bother the Father. Same time, same place. So please join us next week, and we'll see you later.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming. So how long are you going to be